Okay, so this is a quick tutorial on doing pre-design simulation in Revit. And this tutorial exists. If you follow my channel for a while, you know I'm a total fanboy for Format. I think it's great. But in my studio and in my rep classes, we are seeing this error pop up a lot. Error with Insight, please try again later. And so looking for solutions to work around that, where Format is not building these sort of pre-designed simulations off these early forms. So we can have a discussion academically about what we're seeing in terms of energy use before we even really get too far along the design process. We started looking for what's the solution for a similar task inside of Revit. And so I want to walk through those steps. And to be blunt about it, we're seeing better results, the results that I would like to see in Format, using a similar tool set inside of Revit. So here I have, again, a basic sketch that I've imported in and I've scaled. So there is a video for doing that as a process. And what I'm going to be doing is building a massing model over the top of this just to start to study the energy performance and what modifications I could make early in the design process that might have an impact or make an impact on how this design is going to perform. So what I'm going to do is underneath the Architecture tab, Component, Model in Place, and I am going to select the Mass Model category. This is a must-do. This system won't work if you're using generic models or something else. Has to be a mass form. So I'm going to click OK and close. And in my plan view, I'm simply going to draft out. I'm not going to trace accurately because, again, this isn't an accurate drawing, but it's something that is roughly correct in terms of size. So I'm just going to start sketching this out. So I'm going to go 12 feet across. I'm going to come down proportionally and try and aim for some good even numbers. 10 feet seems good. I'm going to bring this at a 45-degree angle. Let's do 30-degree angle. That seems better. 8 feet over. Again, kind of not following the sketch perfectly, but making sure that I am sticking with right angles, right? So I'm looking for my snaps and guides to help me out with that. So again, not following that edge perfectly, but I'm going to bring that to 14 feet. Again, using my guides here to make sure I'm, again, building perpendicular lines. Again, sketch is just a reference sketch. Not a lot of accuracy there. Bringing that back to a 45. And let's close that out just like that. Okay, so you can kind of see it, right? Once I go to a 3D view, that's going to be even easier to see that form that I began to sketch out, right? As a basis for what this could be with a volume. I think let's edit this really quick because I'm not too wild about that line for sure, right? So let's just edit, and I'm using tab and selecting those lines individually. I think 20 feet's a little too long. Let's bring this back in and let's aim for maybe 18. 18, that feels a lot better. 18, and then I have my one odd dimension line here, and then I will close that back together. So I'm connecting endpoint to endpoint. Yeah, that feels more like my sketch. All right, so I have this as a basic form. I need to turn that into a volume. And so to do that inside of my massing tools, I'm going to select all my lines, and I'm going to click Create Form. This gives me the opportunity to establish a height. Maybe I'm going to go 12 feet for this. Kind of splitting the difference. I know I kind of want a double volume in this area, single volume in that sort of block. So I'm just going to, again, it's too early in the design to know exactly where it's going. So I'm just going to split the difference, do a little bit of an extra height in there. I'm not going to go to the point of putting on a gable roof on this end or anything. I'm just wanting to get some basic data so I can study, if I do that, this is a result, right? And I can do that with a simplified form. Again, I'm not using this to get, this is exactly how much energy this design is going to consume. I'm much more interested in if I modify the amount of glass on this facade, what's going to happen as I move forward. Cool. So I've got my basic mass put together. I'm going to click Finish Mass. The next thing I need to do, I need to identify this mass because it's just a blank object. It doesn't know what it is. It doesn't know if it's a desk, a chair, a cabinet, or a building. Going right here to Mass Floors is going to allow me to say it is a single level in this particular case. And that single level is at 0, 0, or at 0, right? So let's just go to our south elevation for my 3D view. I can see that my lower level is on my level 1, right? Once I do that, once I add floors to this, I then know that this object is now a building. I'm telling Revit, this is a building. When I run a simulation, I want you to consider this simple massing form as if it were a building in the simulation. Cool. So we need to go to the Analyze tab and walk through the basics of not all of these tools, but the majority of these tools. And it starts top left, right? We need to establish a location because the location is going to establish our weather and our contextual parameters, right? So we're going to go Location, Inform it. If I look at my location, we were here. This city in Nepal was my site. I'm not going to attempt the pronunciation. You can put that in the comments below if you want to help me with the pronunciation of this city in Nepal. But I'm going to hit Copy. I'm going to bounce back over to Revit. In the search bar, I'm going to paste the city and say Search. That's going to take me to 3 locations that might have that. Let's select the correct one. It's immediately going to take me to the location and the available weather stations associated with the project address. I'm going to go with the default and say OK. And I now have my latitude and longitude set, as well as my localized weather data. I'm going to go to the button to the immediate right of that. And I'm going to say Create Analytical Model and continue to run the analysis. And in here, I'm less interested in this data. So this is going to give me some energy use simulation data that's run not in the cloud, but run locally. And that's nice stuff to have. But what I'm most interested in really is the Settings tab, because my end game here is I want to create the Insight panel. So I can make some modifications and see what's going to happen with certain settings in Insight. So I'm going to click the Settings panel. And here I can see some basic things about how this is going to be computed. In particular, I'm interested in other options. Because in other options, I can start by saying overall how much glazing. So I'm going to say, each wall is going to have some glass. So let's just do 50% glazing everywhere. And again, once I get my insight, I can vary that based on elevation, right? So I can say south elevation is going to have this much, north is this much, so on and so forth. Target percentage skylights, I'm going to leave that at 0. I'm not an office building. I am a single family residence, is what I'm simulating for. And so it will input that data, which isn't available coming from Format at all. Really wish it was, but it's not. Next, a starting point for the HVAC system. Makes a lot more sense to go ahead and select a residential unit less than 5.5 tons, right? Makes much more sense as a base point for that. And those are really the only things that I'm really interested in setting right now. So I'm going to say OK to that and OK. And then I'm just going to go ahead and run analysis. And this is going to run locally. And once it's completed, it will send me a note, and I can open that up as another tab inside of Revit. However, what I want to do is generate an insight. So to generate that insight, what I'm going to be doing is clicking next button down right here, Generate Insight. I'm going to update my analytical model. So any changes that I've made, it's going to update that. I'm going to say OK, and it is going to send that file to the cloud. The first thing that's different about this from Format is I get this email that says your model has been received. You'll receive an email when the analysis is complete, and you can access your results. Super nice, right? That tells me without question, process is started. The next thing that's relevant to this is if something goes wrong in the file, it gives me a report back as well, which as I was going through this did happen. So let's open up that email really quick. So I did get first pass this morning. I did get that it was not able to find this weather station. So it couldn't pull the data to run the simulation. So if something like that happens, the solution is really pretty simple. I can go back to my location. I can select a different weather station and say OK, and run Generate Insight again. So when this happened earlier today, it simply picked up that different weather station. It reran the simulation. It was able to grab that data. And at that point, it was able to complete the simulation without any problems. So usually, depending on the time of day, depending on how many people are pinging Insight to run the simulation, and obviously how complicated your building is. Again, this is not a complicated building. It's a very small house. Really treating this as a single space. It should be fairly quick in terms of generating an insight back. Once it's completed, I'm going to receive another email from Autodesk Insight that will have a tag in it with a link that will take me directly to that Insight page. And we'll start this video up again once that email is received. Okay, so I just received an email from Autodesk Insight saying the analysis is complete. Revit Tiny House 3 and my location and a link. Again, I really like this. It makes it really easy to go back and find the insight that you've been working on because you have this email as a point of reference for it. And, just to be blunt about it, I never delete emails. I have about an 8-year mark. If it's 8 years old, I delete it. So I'm just going to click View Insight. And this should open up a new tab for me. Open link, a new tab. Actually, let me close this down, and I will slide that in from my web browser. So here you can see the building and all of the Insight tiles that I can start working through on this, which I've covered more extensively in the Format simulation. So again, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on those, but you can see it's already made some assumptions about glass around the perimeter on all the sides. And quite simply, I can go in and flip my initial tile. That's my BIM model, my 50%. And I can start working through those and saying, okay, I'm going to have a little bit of less glass, still leaving a variable to account for what I might do with the design here, and know that that's going to have a positive or negative change. I'm actually saving a little bit of energy by doing that. And same thing in terms of glass type. The BIM model has a base default, but if I were to switch to triple low E, again, gaining some savings as I work through those changes on all of the Insight tiles. Again, as I begin figuring out data in terms of what I want this design to do.